Right. So yes, I've built, I'm sure, at least 1,000 units, but I'm old. But I work hard. So what I was going to talk to you about was Edmonton zoning bylaw. Right. It's a big, cumbersome, confusing, frustrating document. It's kind of morphed over the years to become more and more confusing. It contradicts itself, and it's mostly out of step with the market. So changes needed to be made, and slowly they are being made. So I have a side gig. I'm past president of an organization called IDEA, Infill Development and Edmonton Association. And IDEA occupies itself influencing administration and council to make these changes to zoning so that infill is easier to do. So, started out a long time ago. 1933 was Edmonton's first zoning bylaw. It had 11 zones. Zone A, they were lettered, not numbered. Zone A was the River Valley and Ravine Park System. Today there are 45 standard zones, 49 special area zones, 1,540 direct control zones and counting, and 126 use classes. So yes, it's hard to make any sense of any of that. What has stayed the same is the ravine and park system is pretty much the same as it was in 1933. It's something that Edmonton holds very dear and won't tolerate changes to. Oops, how do I go back? How do I go back? There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so the 50s rolled around, and the attitude towards zoning changed. So, and this was sort of the beginning of a bad period. The concept was separation of uses. Everyone's going to have a car, or more than a car. Cars representing freedom. Everyone's going to have their own little lot with the suburbs, with the white picket fence, and mom is going to stay home and take care of the kids, and dad's going to drive to work. So you see the separation of uses. So on that map, you can see the greener areas are the residential areas, and the grayer areas are industrial and commercial areas. So that means that in order to go to work or to get groceries or to go to a restaurant or a movie, you're going to drive there. So that was normal. And, we've evolved. Roads have gotten wider, but I mean, here's a fairly typical 90s street. There's it's not a pedestrian-friendly space, right? The sidewalk is got driveways every 10 meters or so, so pedestrians are vulnerable. There's no gap, there's no boulevard between the curb and the sidewalk, so it's not a pleasant place to walk. If there were anywhere to walk to, right? There's no sensible reason to walk somewhere because there's nothing close, and it's an unpleasant one. So there's very little architectural variety. It's almost exclusively single-family dwellings, and it's clearly car-oriented. And the prominent architectural feature of these houses is double garage door. So yeah, the car culture. You can see the big swooping curve there. That's Millwoods Road. So they've crafted these arterial roads in neighborhoods to be as close as they can to highways, so that people don't really have to slow down. They have the big swooping curves. There's no trees on the boulevard, so you've got great sight lines, and we get upset when people get run over in crosswalks. So there's a mental disconnect there. How many people have heard of the missing middle? Good. Edmonton recently had a missing middle design competition. So um, we've acknowledged that this mid-range, mid-density housing is missing from our mature neighborhoods in particular. Okay, so we've got all kinds of single-family houses. Sometimes on a busy corner there'll be a tower, but there's very little in terms of low-rise condos, courtyard developments, row housing, stacked row housing, those kinds of built forms. Yeah, we recently had a missing middle design competition. I don't know if you heard about that. So the city had, I think it's an acknowledgement that they don't really know what the missing middle is, and they're trying to get some professional definition to it. So there were 30 entries, which to me means that a lot of people are very interested in participating in the missing middle. The city had 5 lots that they were selling to the winning entrant. They're in Spruce Avenue. You guys know what Spruce Avenue is? Sure. It's sort of between Kingsway Mall and the Glenwoods. So great proximity to downtown. It's close to retail. It's close to the LRT runs right past it. There's two LRT stops in walking distance. There's a bike path along it. So it's a really great urban location. Yeah, 30 entries. So it was a great outcome. And now apparently the City of Edmonton Real Estate Department, who has all kinds of similar lots all over the city that are, of course, sitting doing next to nothing. They've got their eye on all these great missing middle projects that people on these lots. So hopefully that'll turn into something in the future. So there are some changes coming to the zoning bylaws, and this is kind of the driest portion of my presentation, I'm sorry to say. So if you have questions as I go through, please put your hand up. So in the zoning bylaw, and then kind of consistent with this segregation of uses that we talked about, that I talked about earlier, we have stacked row housing, we have low-rise apartments, we have row housing, we have garden suites, we have all these specific definitions of housing types, and there are specific constraints for each one, and it's hard to manage, and it tends to be out of step with the market. So if I go somewhere and I see a really cool townhouse project, I'd like to find an opportunity to build it here, but because of these bylaws, very often I can't, or if I do, it's going to be a direct control zone. So I've got to basically buy the property, get it rezoned specifically to what I want to build on it, and that's about a year process, and it's cumbersome, and who knows what the market's going to be like in a year. So they've redefined it. So more than 3 principal dwellings arranged in any configuration, they're just going to call it multi-unit housing, and in most of the mature neighborhood zones, it's going to be allowed. So I'll just go through the most common multifamily zones. So RF1, there's been some changes already. Well, that's a single family zone. That's sort of outside of my presentation tonight. RF3, it allows multi-unit housing anywhere on the block. It used to be confined, anything like that used to be confined only to corner sites. There's still a single detached house on an RF3 lot can have a basement suite and a garden suite, a garage suite. So that's new. They're still talking about 150 square meter site area requirement per dwelling. I was at a workshop just in the last month. I think I got them talked out of that, but you'll see this comes before council on July 9th. with the proposed changes. Site coverage is going from, let's see, 28 plus 12 is 40%, up to 42, and even to 45% for multi-unit. So, RF5, there aren't that many lots, but it seems like they are interested in encouraging people to redesign to RF5. You know, it's a much simpler process to do that than to do a DC rezone. 10-meter height, even within the mature neighborhood overlay, that's a big change. But we're still talking site area for dwelling, which I don't like. They've reduced the side setbacks to 1.2 meters from 3 meters. And the other interesting thing is they will allow buildings the height of garden suites in the rear 12.8 meters of the site. Yes, sir.
Not 1.2 meters side setback.
Yes. Within, so now it becomes a building code restriction. I think you're allowed 7% of the wall surface can be window if it's a 1.2 meter.
Sidewalks on that side too.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
It's 1.2 meters side setback. That's the wall of the building, not everything. But you have a roof spot and you can
Yeah,
have
the roof overhang, I think you're allowed maximum 2-foot roof overhang.
1.2 is the wall, not
That's exactly right, yeah. 1.2 is the wall. Not here. Okay, it's a set of stricter rules. I think it was an effort by council in 2001 to roll back the clock or freeze Edmonton in time in the 1950s. So there's a height. The big thing is there's a couple of big constraints. Height is restricted to 8.9 meters. Okay, so you can't build a 3-story building. You get 2.5 as long as the half-story is 4% of the footprint. Let's see, there's the front setback is the other big constraint. So you have to be within 1.5 meters of the average of the flanking 2 houses. This is pretty complicated. It's that's right. They want everything all matchy. Okay? I don't know. You know, there's all kinds of great research showing that if you're within about 10 feet of the sidewalk, it animates that sidewalk. You know, it's interesting to sit on your porch because you're closer to what's going on in the street, and people are more apt to walk up and down the sidewalk because there's friendly people sitting on their porch nearby. You back off further than that, it becomes people abandon the sidewalk. So, what the cool thing about RF5 is you now have a dwelling at the front of the lot and at the rear, you know, and it can be another house, right? It doesn't have to be a garden suite. It can be, you know, you don't have to have parking. If you're somewhere close to a transit station or the university where students walk with 10-foot cars, it opens up some really interesting possibilities. RF6. There's hardly any of those RF6 lots around. Anyway, they're going to just roll them. They're going to upzone them to RA7. Call it 8. RA7 is the typical low-rise apartment building zone. It's got all kinds of restrictions on it, but it's getting easier. They're sticking with the 4-story height limit, but they're now allowing mixed use, which I think is really cool. So you can have a grocery store, a pub, or a 2-story body rub parlor also. There's no minimum site area. It used to be, I think, 800 square meters, which is pretty big. So 50 by a 50-foot by 150-foot lot is 697 square meters, just under 700. So, yeah, so I know quite a few people who have these, 50 by 150 foot lots that is zoned RA7, and it's technically, the city created that zone, but it really shouldn't exist. It breaks its own rules by existing. So floor area ratio of 2.3. Does everyone understand floor area ratio? Okay, here's another great planning device. So if your lot measures, say, 1,000 square meters, you're allowed to build 2.3 times that. Okay, so that's not your footprint of your building, but over your 4 stories, you're allowed only 3,000 square meters. 2,300 square meters. Yeah. So 2.3 times. That's the cap. And if you're adding some larger, more family-oriented units, they'll let you boost that up to 2.6. So yeah, it's much more flexible than what you're allowed to do. RA8 is the low tower. It's still a 23-meter height limit, so it's basically a 6-story building. So the reason that that's interesting is because under the new building code, you can now build wood frame buildings up to 6 stories. The FARs increased to 3, and again, there's a family-oriented development bonus. I think it's another 0.3, so 3.3. Again, 1 point, so that's not 12 meter, that's 1.2 meter side setback. And this, they've actually given a minimum depth. Sorry, yes. Yes, 3 bedrooms, and I think there's a square footage that they're after as well. So I think what they're trying to do, I know what they're trying to do is they want to make apartment living sensible for families, right? So if a building like this goes up close to a school that they're trying to repopulate, in a mature neighborhood, a school that's on the floors and more, yeah, now we can get little kids back in there to populate the school. And yeah, minimum density is something new, 90 dwellings per hectare. So, yeah, that's something that they've introduced. Does anyone know what a hectare is? No? 10,000 square meters. I think it's 2.64 acres in a hectare. Right, so if the building goes over 10 meters, the side setback comes to 3 meters. Loading? Yeah, I'm not sure what happened to my slide here. I've got a few examples of buildings I was struggling to build. Okay, for some reason I turned my slide sideways. So the project was 2 5-unit row houses with drive aisle and parking at the lowest level. So the driveway would slope down, drop about 5 feet. And then over that drive aisle, connecting the 2 5-unit buildings, was patio space. So the buildings were 20 feet apart, and that was illegal under RA7 zoning, which they wanted to do. Separation space was, I think, it was 5 meters to the center line between the 2 buildings, so it was going to need to be much larger. So they were changing that, and we've got 100 foot by 130 foot, 9 foot wide by 132 foot deep parcel in Grosvenor that I was looking to build this on. But my JV partner is actually trying to buy the next 2 properties as well, so it'll be able to go. So that's on hold. But I'm looking, if you guys have 100 feet of frontage by 130 or so feet deep, and you want to talk about a joint venture, I've got project. This is a mid-block fourplex in Calgary. They've built a whole bunch of these. So instead of taking a 50-foot lot and splitting it and building two skinny houses, they've got these fourplexes. So there's two units that face the front, and the rear two units are just a little bit wider. So their front door also faces the front street, but they're just pushed back 25 feet on the wall. So it's, if you can if you think of a plus sign, there's a unit at each corner. And beautiful finishes, 2.5 stories. These would probably exceed the height limits in a mature neighborhood overlay. But this is where we're heading. And I think we make better money these days, especially building fourplex rather than just going to. Well, it's a difficult dilemma. As cities evolve, these kinds of things happen. Right? If we're going to add density rather to our existing neighborhoods rather than continuing to build ring roads, these are the kinds of things that are going to have to change. So I know it's sensitive. I have these conversations often. People are emotional about where they live, and I think that's good. But we've got a responsibility to the next generation to occupy less of the earth. So here's a building I love in Portland. 3 stories of condos above commercial space. Wouldn't it be great if we saw this on 124th Street or Ritchie, right? We've got a great intersection going on in Ritchie. Why don't we have a few more buildings like this? So we didn't have a zone for it at all. Coming up, yeah. These changes come before the Urban Planning Committee on July 9th, and then there'll be the council in September. So all the indications I see are, they want to go ahead. Like they're spending $2 billion on this new transit LRT extension. We need, if it's going to function properly, that it's going to be ridership. These are the kinds of projects we need to build. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, there is. The city seems really terrified about upzoning, because it turns into a big fun flood, right? Like, you've got an RF1 lot, suddenly it's upzoned to RA8, perhaps, because that's really what's logically close to transit. Well, now your neighbor across the alley is complaining, there's going to be a big building built in front of them. How come you didn't upzone my land so that I can make money off the developer? So there are these kinds of problems. And I think they just need to be confronted. But it's a matter of political courage. Yes. You can build it on with a DC zone, direct control. But yes, if yeah, there's a nice one in Forest Heights. I don't know if you've been to that Cartago restaurant. So that's a good example. But that was a direct control zone. They had to rezone that parcel, describing exactly what they're going to build there. And they couldn't vary from that. So if they decided at some point to sell that land, whoever bought it would be obliged to build that building or rezone it again. So here's a project I'm working on. I've got an offer pending on a lot in Grosvenor. close to 2 LRT stations, behind a multifamily building. So the concept is, it's a fourplex. So can you see that okay? The main floor is kitchen, living room, dining room, times 4, right? Second floor is the bedrooms and bathrooms for 2 of those units, 2 of those main floor, kitchen, living room, bathroom. And then the other 2 units have their bedrooms and bathrooms in the basement, so bi-level style. So, we're in Edmonton, we got to develop those, we've got to dig those basements. So my thinking is let's do some development down there. It, as a rental proposition, it makes a lot more sense than just a pokey little basement suite down there. And so I think the numbers are gonna work as a rental. I got the lot for $283, and the build cost is going to be about, it looks like $560, just rough numbers. And there'll be some financing as well, but I think it makes sense. And it's a 44-foot wide lot, so I'm nervous about the skinny house market. I've been looking around for things to build that something less than a 50-foot lot. Price of 50-foot lots has really gone up over the last couple of years, and the price of skinny houses really hasn't gone up over the last couple of years. It's stagnant, so that's our margin. There's the site plan. So, again, idea, we've been around since 2013. I'm the past president, and now I'm chair. So I'm the past president now, former president. I'm also the chair of the infrastructure committee, so I was leading the charge of council to get the hydrant funding fixed. We've recently had I guess a battle over OSCAM permits. So OSCAM is off-street construction and maintenance. So if you wanted to park a garbage bin on the street, you had to get an OSCAM permit, and it was free. As of December 1st, it became $25 per day to park a bin on the street. Now, what really got me mad was, have you seen the tree protection that infill builders are obliged to put up? Well, to do that tree protection, you needed an OSCAM permit. So I said, wait a minute, you're not paying me to do this tree protection. I'm protecting your trees. They're not on my property. And now you're going to charge me $25 a day for, the 5 or 6 months of the build to do that. So, they backed off. But it's just another example of the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing. So that was a recent win for IDEA. IDEA was the first proponent of the lots of reducing the lot width of our farm lots from 33 feet to 25. Okay, so if you're making money, you split lots. That's because IDEA. There's IDEA who pushed for suites in duplexes and row housing. Okay, so we're consulted on every piece of legislation that the city's proposing to change to do with zoning. Parking is another thing that's come up. I don't know if you heard about it on the news, but I think it's coming up in October before the planning committee. The proposal is that parking be up to the discretion of the developer. Okay, so no more parking minimums for restaurants, for apartment buildings, for anything. It's the developer who's taking the risk. So if I decide to build a 200-unit apartment building with 0 parking stalls, That's on me. So, I think it's interesting. I think it's exciting. I think it's going to be good for Edmonton. We're building a really cool city here. It takes a while. Any other questions? Yeah.
Why would they?
Two-level basement?
Yeah.
Like go to extra deep?
Yeah.
You know, windows down there, or else a really deep window. You have to put a railing around it so it won't fall in.
I would say that.
No, I mean, they built parkades that are many stories deep. Yeah, well, yeah. Then that big bomb drops on. Yes.
Have you looked into,
I have actually. Yes. Co-living or co-housing, co-ops. Yeah, there's a few different variations on that theme. I'd be happy to talk to you after. I do have some ideas. Yeah, so that fourplex example I just showed you, if you could reimagine that. So what if that main floor were wide open to all the units and it had a big kitchen, maybe a TV room at one end, and then a shared workspace, like desks and stuff. It would be. So this sort of stuff is happening in San Francisco and that Silicon Valley area, New York City, close to some of the big American colleges. This sort of thing is going on for student housing. So, you've got a roommate in your suite, and you're sharing that communal space. So, I mean, if you're in the tech world and you're writing code 18 hours a day. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and they look out for each other, and they share the chores of cleaning up, or they bring someone in once a week to do the cleaning. Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea. Well, kind of depends. So if they're insisting on 150 square meter lot area per unit, 50 by 150, you get 4.5. So you could talk them into 5.